This drip all on my body, soaking wet the sunny. Looking like a walking lick, yeah, you can tell I'm grinding. Rolling back was full of loud, I can't hear nobody.
What's up, fuckers? Episode 20, The Beer Latte Show. I'm Steve.
I'm Nick.
Danielle.
And today we have Liz Entin on the line. Liz, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good.
I'm good.
Good.
Look, we're all good. So I know, similar to me for a while, I'm still kind of on the fence, but I know you're a big skeptic, or were a big skeptic on the afterlife or anybody with psychic abilities.
I still consider myself skeptical. I guess I would say more evidential, but I've seen such a tremendous amount of evidence when I began researching it that I think it's very highly probable.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So you're still open to the idea that it's possible.
I would actually even say probable. Okay, so I just had never given it even that much thought my whole life. I always assumed there was zero chance of an afterlife and zero chance of psychic abilities. I gave them about as much thought as I did something like the earth is flat or anything else. It was just a pile of nonsense and not really worth much thought. And then there was unfortunately a loss in my family, and I decided to take a shot in the dark, kind of out of desperation. I can even get to where my mindset got me started, but I decided to examine. And after a lot of research and meeting a lot of people, I was pretty blown away by some of the stuff that I saw, as well as the people I met. And it changed my mind. I absolutely can't say it's definite by any means, but that there seems to be a high probability.
You went to see your first psychic at that point?
Well, there were quite a few steps beforehand. My very first thought was that so much of science fiction seems to come true, which unfortunately seems to be more true than ever lately.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, right. So there were things such as, FaceTime. I mean, things that we just all take for granted that if you watch old school science fiction, it's completely made up. And things such as flying cars, not that we have those yet, but realistically, I could see those in 100 years from just things I've read. And so I thought, well, time travel is one of the key aspects of science fiction. Could there be any possibility of it? So I started to research, and I read a lot of Einstein that said, well, obviously time travel is far from easily done or realistically done. Theoretically, it's very possible. So that got me thinking that everything that we perceive, that our perceptions are not quite as set as we feel they are. And so my next thought was, could say that consciousness is caused just by brain neurons and brain reactions. And that's what I assumed. But I thought realistically, if this happened to me once to create a consciousness in myself, why could that not happen again just through pure materialism? And not that there would be anything related to it like karma or anything spiritual, but why could another brain not create a consciousness that was me? Then I wondered if within that, was there any possibility that memories of a previous life could somehow be stored? And from there, I Googled basically that question, and I found two researchers, Dr. Ian Stevenson, who's passed away, and his protege, Dr. Jim Tucker, and they're child psychiatrists. Jim Tucker is currently also a professor and researcher at the University of Virginia. Ian Stevenson was also there. And they started to examine cases of kids with past life memories. And he was getting some remarkable results to the point where Scientific American did an article on him. I believe it was Psychology Today also did one on him, NPR. I mean, this was someone being taken reasonably seriously. And so I started to research further, and that just one door opened where I found, for example, someone called Dr. Gary Schwartz, and then a place called the Windbridge Institute, which did scientific studies with mediums. Someone called Dr. Julie Beischel is the head of that. And also, I started to read into their research and a few other books, and I was just, I guess, partially blown away and also partially very skeptical, assuming there has to be a catch. So I decided to reach out to one of the mediums on the Windbridge website. And she has a very long wait list, which I'm still on, but I since got to know her a little bit, as well as I found, kind of through a bunch of steps, the names of another medium. I went in expecting nothing. I did all the disguising, hidden name, secret everything. And she knew stuff that absolutely blew me away. So I could not, I was shocked. And from there, I just kept researching further, and I went to piles of other mediums, and, quite a few after that did not live up to her standards, what my experience with the first one. So I thought maybe I'd imagined it. I unfortunately had not recorded my first session with my first medium, which now I know you ideally should record. But the further I studied, I ended up having a few other absolutely mind-blowing readings. And from there, many other steps that kind of I outline in my book, I end up finding a place that also does research on mediums called the Forever Family Foundation. I decided to volunteer with them to examine further, and just weird things would happen the further I examined. And I still can't say I've drawn a conclusion, because I'm very stuck on how could consciousness exist outside of a brain? Where would it live? What would consolidate and hold it together in an identity, in a set of memories? But I also absolutely cannot deny what I've seen and experienced.
You've researched this more than I've done anything in my life. By like 25 times.
Oh my God.
So your first psychic experience with the psychic that you were blown away by, did you give her a fake name or fake identity, or?
So I gave her my first name, a different last name, a secret email address, or just a made up email address. I paid in cash when I got there. And my big screw up, which then led me to going to piles of other mediums, was I gave my phone number instead of a Google Voice number. So I was like, well, she could have Googled that, but she knew stuff that was not Googleable. And that was what really blew me away. And then going forward with all the other readings, I still gave a real first name, or varying versions of, like, I've given Elspeth instead of Elizabeth, a different last name. And then I've used Google Voice numbers. I've used a VPN for my website in case there's some technology they have that could track my site or my computer. Whenever I've had to pay, I've found a friend's credit card or PayPal or Venmo, and not a family member, no one that would somehow, if they were Googled, would apply to me and choose strong away.
Interesting.
And some of them blew me away.
You went about it pretty smart. Kind of criminal-like.
She's going in with a trench coat and the nose and the eye, the big.
You don't know who I am.
Eyebrows.
I got to start buying shit with my friend's credit cards. That's a good idea.
Yeah. What nice friends you have.
Yeah, you want to share those numbers?
I'm lucky I have good friends. And one thing that some of the mediums I've now actually become good friends with laugh about is there are two mediums, one of whom has become a good friend of mine. Both required mailing in a piece of paper in advance that you fill out. I'm not really sure the mentality behind that, as opposed to emailing it or filling out on the website. But, well, actually, I know the mentality. One of them says she likes to feel it and touch it because she gets a lot of information that way, which I find really interesting. But I used rubber gloves because I was like, what if they find a way to track fingerprints?
Oh my God. She's really sleuthing this whole thing.
At this point, you can rob banks with all your stuff you're doing.
I know. I could switch to a whole field of criminology. Or being a criminal, I guess, not criminology.
I was going to say a whole nother field.
Whole other career twist. You know, I've already had one massive twist in my life. Why not become a bank robber next, or art thief or something? Probably shouldn't joke. There's going to be some huge, like, art thief, and then they're going to hear this and come investigate me. Okay, just anyone right listening who thinks that.
Okay, change it. She's not using her real name.
Now I can't use my real name. Anyone listening, I am an ethical person. I don't believe in stealing.
Anybody who's unethical would say they are ethical. We're not fighting.
Oh, no. You're making this harder.
You're still incriminating yourself.
Oh, no. If I end up in jail in a few years for something I did not do.
We'll call you there and still interview you from jail.
Yeah. I mean,
yes.
Probably get a lot of information there. So what really blew you away?
My God, it was what I guess I find so interesting. It was lots of little things that end up piling together, because one experience could be just blown off as a coincidence or an anomaly. So I would say, I mean, just some of the highlights. One thing is the fact that I've befriended some of these mediums, which was the last thing I expected. I mean, they're just the most normal, down-to-earth, kind people. So it's really hard to look at your friend and who's a really normal, logical person and say, you're delusional or you're a con artist. That was one part of it.
I say that to my friends all the time. And my husband.
All the time.
No, like,
you're like, you guys are all crazy.
Yeah.
And evil con artists. Yeah. That was one part. And then just so many little things. Like I said, the mediums getting stuff about me, watching them in group readings, getting shocking stuff on other people. I think some of the data I'd read through some of the research, and getting to meet some of the researchers and seeing that they're really logical, careful researchers. They're not just the image I had of people in this world. And then I'd say a few weird things that happened to me along the way. I mean, okay, so when one of the readings, one of my cat had just died, and I hadn't posted it. I hadn't said anything about it anywhere really, except to a few good friends. And I went to the reading, and she knew my cat had recently died, described her personality. It was just crazy things. She knew my grandmother had a baby who'd passed away. I mean, just things that are not stuff you would just know or not easily Google. And then, I mean, I had a few of my own weird experiences. One time, I went to Forever Family Foundation, one of their events, and I'd started volunteering for them some, so I'd gotten to know some of the people. And the last night at one of the banquets, they had a panel of about 8 mediums that they've certified, and they put them through. They keep the details of how they certify them pretty secret, so I don't really know all the details, but they use science-based testing to make sure the mediums can't cheat, have no idea who they're reading in the testing. Just again, I don't know all the details because they do keep it pretty secret, but it's just things that would prove that the medium cannot research who they're reading, cannot even see them face to face. So at least now, I think in one of the books I read, they used to do it face to face in person, but now they don't. So for the final night of their event, which is called the Afterlife and Mediumship Convention, some of the people who were there as guests said that they had their own abilities and were there to learn to get to be mediums. So one of the heads of the Forever Family Foundation, Bob Ginsberg, jokingly said to me, knowing how skeptical I am, Liz, why don't you go up and try to do readings? And I was laughing, Like, yeah, right. And then I just thought it'd be funny to go and kind of try to do a fake one. And there was also this man there called Lloyd Arbach who teaches classes at a place called the Rhine Education Center, and they're on things like afterlife research, but done really like the science behind it and studies and statistics of experiments done. So it's a very logical, not spiritual, no woo type of place. And I'd taken a class with him, and one was on developing your mediumship abilities and how to find a psychic or how to find a medium. And I took them just out of curiosity, knowing I'd have no abilities. And he also taught how to do, or a bit about cold reading, which is when a medium will do things such as give very general information or look at you and be able to tell by aspects, physical characteristics, things about you that they can then use into a fake reading. Or they'll ask questions like, you don't have a grandfather on the other side, do you? And if you say yes, they say, I thought so. If you say no, they say, I thought so. So I thought it would just be fun to go do kind of a joke, very obvious cold reading. And so while starting to do that, I was feeling really weird. I was feeling like a little dizzy. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, I'd have a glass of wine maybe, or I don't even know if I'd had wine at that point. I don't think I had, because we were just at dinner. But I think I just felt, sometimes you're around a lot of people, you're really busy, you'll, sometimes feel a little tired at the end of the day. So I wasn't thinking very much of it. And while I was doing this very jokingly, like I got dizzier and dizzier, and I felt really weird. Like, I don't even know if dizzy is the right word, but when you're on a boat and you're going up and down in waves, it was like my whole body felt like that, but I felt like waves were kind of pouring through me. And I have no idea why, but I walked over to one of the mediums and I just started to say things. I can't even say I thought them, but they kind of just came out. It was one of the weirdest things of my life. For example, like at one moment, I felt like all those waves I said were moving through me, like consolidate into one spot in my head and start almost as if they were exploding, like they left all the rest of my body and just were focused in this part of my head. And I was like, did you lose someone to an aneurysm? He said, yes. Then I felt them move to my heart and doing the same thing. And I asked if someone had had a heart attack. And he said, yes. And I mean, I'm nowhere near the level of a medium, so I wasn't getting accurate enough information. And most people have lost someone to a heart attack. So if a medium's like, did you lose someone to a heart attack? You go back to like grandparents, great uncles and aunts. Like it's, I wouldn't call that evidential, but it was really weird. And I think the fact that I had these sensations associated with it was just mind blowing. I was just like, what the fuck? This is so weird. And I think that just opened me up more. I mean, that was just one of many things, but that was kind of a turning point to my kind of being able to understand their experiences when they tried to explain them. And so I just was kind of my conversation when I'd ask them questions went to another level. I can't say I suddenly was like, oh my God, this is all real and there's an afterlife. And I still can I always try to come up with like both explanations for everything that happens to me, or multiple explanations. But, at this point, I felt like there's something weird going on. And then I just feel like I can't rule it out.
Well, you're clearly a medium, so you've been lying to us this whole time.
Right?
Well,
what am I going to be? An art thief, a medium, a criminal?
You have options. That is nice.
Options.
Would you say it was just an energy that moved through you? Like, you could physically feel it. You could physically kind of understand it and vocalize it.
I don't know. I had one medium who later explained to me that, this carnate consciousness, our loved ones who passed away, press on our nervous system and manipulate that to give us information. And that's what was going on. Maybe I just felt, maybe my mind tricked me and gave me all these sensations because I needed to believe this. Maybe I was psychically in connecting my brain with this person the way, they say that, what is it, like through micro expressions, and blanking on the word. It's a fairly well-known word, but when you're making eye contact with someone and talking with them, like your brain waves match up in certain ways. Maybe that was happening.
Like you're
Maybe
syncing up with somebody else.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I have no idea. I mean, that's the interesting thing, but it felt like nothing I'd ever felt before in my whole life, even that weird wavy feeling. And since then, I've had more experiences that have felt like that. It's really interesting. Yeah. And the fact that I was getting accurate information and just how different it felt to anything else.
Now, when you're with your psychic friends, have you ever talked about this? Do they feel the same kind of sensations?
They do. Yeah, except more intensely and more frequently. Oh, yeah, I talked about it with them nonstop for a while.
You're just trying to figure out if you're going crazy or not?
No, I was just trying to figure out what this is. I don't think I ever thought I was going crazy. I think I thought, was I making things up out of wishful thinking? Or maybe there really is something going on. I was just more fascinated. I mean, these are crazy mysteries of our universe, and they're just so fascinating. So I just feel like I could talk about it with them all day.
Well, we spoke with a medium, and she said that everybody can get in touch with the other side. You just need to train, kind of for it.
Yeah, kind of like what Liz has done.
Yeah, that's what they say. And they're really blasé about all this, because I remember one of the mediums, Renee Buck, that I've become pretty good friends with, she was at this weekend, but she left a day early. So she wasn't there for the final night when I did this. So we were talking a few weeks afterwards, and I said to her, I was like, oh my God, the craziest thing happened. You wouldn't believe it. I can't believe you missed the last night. So I told her the story, and I was like, and then I was getting all this information, and Joe Scheel, the medium I was reading, kept saying it was accurate. And she was like, yeah. And she's waiting as if I was going to say something else. And she's like, yeah, and then what happened? I was like, what do you mean, and then what happened? That's the craziest thing that's ever happened ever to me. And she was like, oh, yeah, that's normal. Take my class, the same things will happen. And I took her, and that was the second time that happened. Something really crazy happened similarly in the final day. But it doesn't happen to me normally. But I mean, yeah, mediums say it. Anyone can do it. And from my experiences, given that this is all true and it really is like communicating with the other side, if I can do it, anyone can. But I can't do it regularly. I can't do it well for people.
Do you think it's a matter of interest, or just a matter of concentration, or just a matter of natural ability?
Well, it's definitely not interest or concentration, because I think this is incredibly fascinating. I wouldn't say it's concentration, because I certainly concentrated really hard on doing this, especially in my research, and as well as just it's so interesting. I don't know what it is. My guess is it's some biological difference that you're born with. Like Lloyd Arbach, who I mentioned in the beginning, I thought said something really interesting about this. He also says anyone can do this, but he'll be like, well, anyone can sing. Most people just aren't that good. Then you have Beyonce, and
right, yeah. So natural ability, yeah. It's like a sixth sense. Well, I guess it is a sixth sense.
It is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the epitome of a sixth sense.
Exactly. It's actually the actual definition.
I thought I just came upon something, but I didn't.
So you've taken multiple classes to try to hone in on your sixth sense?
I have. I've taken lots of classes on that. I've taken classes on the research and scientific studies. Most of the classes I've taken, nothing has happened. Like, I'll just say the first thing that comes to mind. They'll divide us into groups, and I'll just say what comes to mind. And the people I think to be nice most of the time tend to say yes. And I think it's true that I get things right, but not just the way you would look at anyone, and the first thing would logically come to your mind, even if you're not trying to do a cold reading or cheating. Like, I'll be, it tends to be, the majority of people in this class tend to be older. I'm usually the youngest one there. And so you look at them and assume they've obviously lost a grandparent. I try not to say, something that, not that losing a grandparent isn't devastating, but I try not to go with something that might just completely cut to their heart at the moment. Like, did you just lose a husband? Like, I mean, unless I got that, like, really feeling in some intense way.
Right.
But, logic, you look at someone, then I'll be like, it just like it comes to my mind, it pops into my mind, but in the same way logical things always would, looking at someone, I'll be like, did she bake cookies? And I feel like you'd go there and feel really safe. And they're always like, yes, you're getting this. And it feels really different than the 2 times I think I got something or something weird happened. I don't want to say I know what it was, but it's not that those things aren't coming to my mind when I do the other. And it's not like I'm trying to make them think. It's just the first things that come to my mind, the way almost anyone else, if you ask them to look at somebody and say, who do you think's died in their life, and talk about them. So, and that would just come logically to me. And I tend to be right. But that's kind of the definition of cold reading, just when done in a wrong way.
You're like, do you know somebody that died? I'm on.
Yeah, exactly. You know someone that died, but
you
I'm
have
not trying
great.
to trick anyone. Yeah,
It'll come
in
to
your
you.
Life, I think you have a great great grandparent who's passed away.
You have ancestors.
You have ancestors. There's someone in your lineage, in fact, more than one, who's died.
I feel like they're from another country. Is this correct? I could be great at this.
And at Forever Family events, I usually, since that one weird time, they usually do have me go give a reading like that, but just to be funny and kind of, lighten the mood a little. But I mean, no, I've done it many other times, but no other time has like a weird thing happened to me. It's just always been kind of a joke. So
do you practice on your friends and stuff?
No. I mean,
I
no.
would. I'd be practicing on everybody.
I probably should, but I mean, I'm not really a medium, and I don't get, it's not like my medium friends just have stuff come to them. I mean, I have done exercises with one of them. I'm good friends with him. We'll try this medium, Joe Peretta. We've done these exercises together, and I mean, you can just see the difference. I mean, he'll just be like, so think about what this person's career is. Like, he'll get a random photo on his phone of someone who's passed away, and then he'll be like, think of how the energy of how it feels if someone's a doctor, actor. I'm like, what? I don't know what you mean by that. Like, that's just not how I go through life. Like, what do you mean how their energy feels? And he was like, oh, you don't feel that? I was like, no. I like, what?
So it's just a whole nother way of thinking, and they're just trying to share with you how they do it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Because, some people even think in color and stuff like that. Like, we just have no idea other people's perceptions. I mean, shit just flies out of their mouth, and we think we all think the same, but we don't. That's amazing.
I know, which is so weird. I mean, we really don't. And, even when you think about how someone sees color, it's like you look at a blue and you assume they're seeing blue the way you see blue, but maybe it's their red, or maybe they see colors that you've never seen in your whole life. I mean, maybe every person sees completely different colors. I mean, you just have no idea.
Yeah. Just like somebody pointed out to me that my brother is colorblind. So in theory, I've got that extra sense. You know what I'm saying? So he doesn't have that sense of, seeing color. Or does he? Who the hell knows?
Well, something about red and green or something.
Yeah, that is so cool. It is so cool how we just all don't think the same, but we all can communicate.
Right. I know. And it just, I always wish I could just kind of jump into somebody's brain. Like, imagine if you could just have a year where each day you could sort of live in another person's brain and just see how the world physically looks. I mean, it's just it's kind of baffling. And I remember one of the mediums, I don't remember all the details of it, but this one medium, Janet Mayer, she has a really interesting book too, kind of about all of this. But she was telling a story, and I believe this is in her book, but I more remember it from her telling me. But she had this experience where she kind of felt she was like almost out of body and seeing things. And she said she described it in her book as like these intense fluorescent colors, but she said it was a color she'd never seen in her life. That's not part of like our color spectrum. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's just so crazy. I mean, imagine if you walked into a room one day and it was a color that didn't exist in terms of what you'd ever seen. Like, you can't even really imagine what that would be like.
Right. I one time watched this thing when I was a young girl. It was on, I don't know, one of the regular news channels, 247 or whatever. But it was this person who had a near-death experience, so they believed they had gone to heaven, and once they had gotten there, she expressed that she saw colors that she's never seen here, and she could never even describe here. Isn't that crazy?
I've heard that, and I've heard some researchers who study near-death experiences, people who were blind their whole lives could see during that moment, and then they described things. They described seeing, and they're like, they hadn't understood the word of what seeing was, but then they were like describing it and realized that must be what sight is. It's so crazy. I mean, I would just love the experience of seeing a color that didn't exist.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And today we have part 2 of Tuckahoe Brewing. We have 2 beers from them, starting with what they're calling Funny Colored Balls. That is an IPA, 6.3%. Yeah, well, it tastes like an IPA.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a normal IPA. It has that citrus smell to it, a nice crisp taste, though.
Yeah, it tastes more hoppy than fruity, though.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad. I like it a lot.
So the irony here is I am not tasting crisp. I am tasting smooth on a crisp edge.
What does smooth taste like?
I don't know. Just not as crisp as most IPAs.
All right. So, Danielle, on your 1 to 10 hop scale to IPAs, where are you putting it?
I will go 6.5.
6.5. Wow, that's not bad. I didn't see you go so high, honestly. Nick, where are you at on a 1 to 10?
I fairly enjoy it. I'm going to give it a 7.4.
You know, it's a fair rating. It's like you said, it's crisp. It is smooth, like Danielle's saying. It's not too hoppy, just enough hops. I like it.
No, yeah, it has a good flavor to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it's very drinkable. Percentage isn't too high. You know, and I'm going to be at like a 7.
Okay.
You know, it's very good. It's very enjoyable, and I put it in the mid to high range there. And then next up, we have what they're calling an Imperial Coffee Stout with the name New Brighton. This is black. It's a 9% stout.
That's awesome.
I'm almost afraid to try it.
No.
Everyone knows I'm not the biggest fan.
It's so good. And when they say coffee, they really do mean it.
Yeah, it tastes like I'm drinking coffee, probably like a hint of bourbon in it.
I really, really like it.
Well, tastes dark. However, it is incredibly smooth and super coffee tasting.
Yeah, it's basically just coffee tasting.
Which makes it better for me than most dark beers because it's such a strong coffee taste in this one.
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily that we had a coffee stout before.
I've had them in the past. I don't know if we've
I
done
meant
them
on the show. I don't know exactly what I would eat this with.
I could eat this with dessert. And when I
guess it is
when I
drink-
say eat this, I mean
I guess it is drink this. I don't know.
it would be really good with dessert, actually.
Yeah, I guess it would be. I'm not going to call it like a dessert beer, but it would be good with
No, but
dessert.
it could be.
And, you know, it is. It's actually really good.
I know. It's amazing.
I'm actually a little bit impressed with this one.
To me, a coffee stout isn't like a normal dark beer.
That's
That's
true.
true.
I guess because I don't know.
Because-
I never had a coffee stout before.
Yeah, because I mean, I've had a few coffee beers before, and it's basically just the fact that it's for the coffee lover.
It really is good.
I think it's awesome. I think it's really good.
No, it's very good. It's certainly different than all the other dark beers. I guess because it's a coffee stout.
Fucking crack that open in the morning with your cereal.
I might. I might tomorrow. I don't know.
Won't.
Might be a little fucked up to work. It is a 9%er.
I don't care. Worry about yourself.
How about you worry about yourself?
Yeah, just get another injury, lose another finger.
Yeah. No, that's fucking good.
Yeah.
So Danielle, on your dark loving scale,
I'm going 9.
9.
Yeah.
Wow.
I really
right off
like
the
it.
bat.
Didn't even finish my sentence. Just screamed 9.
No, I know.
Not allowed to. It's too good to finish a sentence.
It's
Wow.
too good.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my highest rating ever.
Possible. Anyone out there that's actually listening to all these and paying attention? Can someone make a chart?
Yeah,
and send it to us.
We need an Excel sheet.
Yeah, and that way you can prove to us how maybe we're either doing this right or our scale is so fucking off.
I'm going to make a chart and put it somewhere in the
Just every time, just add a new beer to it.
whiteboard. I'll put a whiteboard.
Nick, where are you rating this on a 1 to 10?
I fairly enjoy it too. I'll drop it at a 7.1.
Oh, okay. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to compare this to my other dark beers. I think I'm going to put this in like a 7.8, which is higher than even some IPAs.
Yeah.
However, I am basing that off of previous dark beers.
Yeah.
Other IPAs, of course, based off other IPAs. Oranges and oranges, you know?
Sure. Or
Fruit.
coffee and coffee.
Right, this is beer versus beer. and that is Tuckahoe Brewing. You can find them at Tuckahoe CO on Instagram and tuckahoebrewing.com. Do you believe in reincarnation?
Me, I don't believe anything. I just try to like take evidence. I kind of hate belief because it doesn't matter what you believe or not. I think the research of Dr. Jim Tucker, Dr. Ian Stevenson, as well as these piles of like anecdotal things that people are saying makes me think it's really, really probable. And when I say anecdotal, I mean, I'm not talking about people who are like, I was like a queen in a past life. What I'm talking about is that there were certain consistencies in the research of Dr. Stevenson and Tucker, such as kids tend to have those memories until they're 5 years old and then they forget. They'll always say lines like, when I was big. They'll have a lot of emotions attached. They tend to have very ordinary memories. You know, like if you make up a past life, people are like, as I was saying, I was a queen. I was, this knight. But they remember little things like leaving their backpack on the floor at the end of the day and having like hot chocolate with their mom, like the things we really, truly remember and care about in life. And then if I start reading other books about it or have talked to some friends that are interested in this, there's just this complete consistency. Or even going on Quora and people will be like, oh, it's so weird. My kid was saying when I was big, or they have this and they remembered this till they were 5. I mean, just this complete consistency. And that's what I just find really fascinating. So I think it's really probable. But just I get stuck at where does the consciousness go then between lives?
Right.
And how?
And my research starts and then stops with my child.
With your child.
Yeah. But he often said, I think it was like 1.5 or so, kind of when he's really like fully learning talking stuff like that. But he would just look at us and say, I chose you. And we're like, what? And he would say, like,
so cool.
He'd be like, yeah, God let me choose you.
He didn't say it like that. I don't remember how he said it. That's how you interpreted it, though.
They used to say all the time, like, I chose you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
And they would hug us, and we're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, he
Get off
also,
us.
there's this library from my old high school that I used to bring him to, too. And he would say random stuff like, I used to follow you around the high school halls. And I was like, what? And I would try to feed him. Like, I would be like, yeah. I said, but Mom, you went to high school like a long time ago. And he's like, I know. He would just this little boy, like, no big deal.
I love that. And that's completely consistent with what they say in the books. And then the more people I talk to and start talking about this, so many people will be like, yeah, I never really talk about it, but, and then there's a story like you just said, this consistency. And how old's your kid now? Your son?
He's 8 now.
Right?
He doesn't say anything cool anymore.
Oh. Oh.
It's kind of mean.
Oh, he's mean, you said?
Yeah, he hasn't chose us anymore.
Yeah. He's regretting choosing us at this point.
He's like, you guys, why are you my parents? A few more years, and he'll really be like, I would never have chosen you.
Yes, that's the 21-year-old. She has that. But she used to say weird stuff too. Like, but she would say really weird stuff like, "There's a man with blue hair on the ceiling."
Oh my god.
Yeah, that was weird.
So cute.
But she also used to remember the one time she said she saw my grandparents at the top of the stairs?
No, I was in the bathroom with her.
No, that was her grandparent. That was her grandmother. The day that her grandmother passed, she screamed out of the shower, and she assumed that she had saw her when she was in the shower. Like she had materialized to her.
Like she was like getting out of the shower and she was like standing there. She screamed.
Yeah, she screamed.
We thought like she was getting kidnapped or some shit. We're like, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And she said she saw her grandmother.
Yeah.
Oh my god, what the fuck? It's so crazy. I've heard so many stories like that too, including from people who absolutely don't believe this. They'll be like, well, I absolutely don't believe it, but, when my grandma died,
I haven't seen shit. I'm a little pissed. If you're out there tonight.
Yeah, no, because I'll be the one awake and stay away.
Tuck me in or something.
So you've never seen anything, but you believe it.
Well, that's not fully true. One day when I was, I don't know, younger,
Oh yeah, I remember.
I was riding my bike back from my friend's house, and we lived on the same block, but there was the block was shaped like an H, I'll call it. So it was like across like two parallel, streets, and then a street that cuts in between them. And the street that cuts between them also leads into the woods. And I remember seeing, I always look down there. I'm assuming this is because of like a fear of the dark when you're younger. But I remember seeing a kid like glowing on the hill on a bike. And I don't think I've ever pedaled so fast in my life.
You said you pedaled so fast you ran into the shed, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't stop to like open a door. I like did a wheelie, like bashed the door open, just ran in the house. I was like, I'm home.
That's so cool. My God, I wonder though why like everyone's scared when it happens, but in reality, it's the coolest thing. Like,
Yeah, he was rather far,
Okay.
but it was still scary. And I think not so long after that, I heard someone, and I don't even know if that's true, that a kid hung himself in those woods. I mean, that could have been made up because after I told my story, they're like, let's get him.
Right. Or one of those rumors are probably everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody dies. So 100% of places you go to, someo's died in some way. Yeah. But
Stop
Great.
looking around, Steve.
very
Nobody's
cool.
died here yet.
Great, my wife's not sleeping. Thanks, Liz. You can go now.
Sorry. You can go. Podcast over. You're canceled.
Well, I wonder why he was glowing. That's just weird.
That's why it's probably like more of a fear of the dark. That's like, I don't know.
It's like Ghost Rider. You're watching too
flames
much
off his
movies.
back. No, it was like the ghost you see in like the movies or those fake TV shows.
What do you think about coincidence?
Oh God.
Do you think there's a
think it
such thing as coincidence, or do you feel like coincidence is just another phenomenon that, like, you know what I'm saying?
I think it depends on each situation. I definitely think there's coincidence, a large amount of it, but I think a certain frequency of coincidences stops being so coincidental, if that makes sense, or a certain level of shocking coincidence stops being coincidence. But I definitely think there's just plain coincidence too.
Yeah. I mean,
I would
there's
guess,
people who say
yeah.
that there's no such thing as coincidence. That's where I was going with that.
Yeah, I mean, I would find that hard to believe. I mean, it also, like, what is the level of coincidence? I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's coincidence. I mean, that kind of goes into, do we even have free will? I think if we have free will, which I think we do, I don't think there's some other consciousness that's planned and controlled every single one of our moves. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to think that, but there's some theories that like we're basically watching a movie of our life that's all pre-scripted and we have no free will, and we feel like we do, but it's essentially being in our lives is the same as watching a movie. Then yeah, I don't think that. I mean, you never know anything 100%, but yeah, in that case, then no, there's no coincidence. Everything's planned. But I think given that there's free will, there has to be coincidence.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
I
agree.
think to an extent, like some stuff is just like odd. But
Yeah.
some stuff's like, of course it's coincidence. Like, why not?
Yeah.
It's safer to say that.
And they,
I've had like some serious coincidence. Like one time I was in that same library I was just referring to, and my friend was looking for a book, like a specific book. Like I think it was on the Italian Renaissance art. Like that's how specific it was. And like back then you had the Dewey Decimal System. But anyway, she couldn't find this book. And something came over me and I was just getting fed up. I was like, what if that book up there on that shelf is the book? So I was like, you go and play the badass. And I was like, I grabbed the book off the shelf. I go, is this your book? And it was the fucking book she was looking for out of the whole library. That was the book.
that's so weird.
And
I mean, that could be so many things. That could be like coincidence and luck.
yeah.
That could be like recognizing it, like seeing the title, but like we don't know how much we're perceiving information on a conscious plane. Maybe we see literally just like in a material sense, we see details, many more details than our brain perceives. So maybe
True. Yeah. Could have been. Well, it was on the top shelf and I'm quite short. So I'm not sure that I saw it, but I mean, there could have been something there. But on that same day, I was looking for this one person to walk in the door. And I said to myself, like, I wonder if at like 3:00, this person is going to walk into the library. Like, how random would that be? Person walks into the library. So it was just a coincidental day.
Well, there's some theory too that we know things like premonitions a few seconds before they happen. And people will say, oh, like if you're going to go like the more believy route, like psychics can predict big events, but there's just all this evidence, both like we'll dream little things before they happen, or just small, like a lot of dreams like predict the future, but really boring, meaningless things. And I mean, I've had little moments like that. And I know I mentioned Lloyd Arbach at the beginning of this. He says he's had dreams of conversations, and then they'll actually happen. And then he'll kind of fuck with people and say what they're going to say as they say it. And they're like, how did you know? And then there have been these crazy studies that apparently, like I forget exactly, but for example, like if you shine like a bright light, people's pupils react, contract. And that apparently that happens like a split second before the stimuli is given, before the light's given, or, just people have physiological reactions a few seconds, or probably less than a few seconds, I forget the exact amount, before something occurs, which is so crazy.
Who knows where our perception is actually at?
So crazy. Yeah. And we do fill in a lot of things apparently. And I guess magicians work with this when they make illusions. Like I'm going to screw this up, but I have the theory right, but the facts not perfectly. But there's some part like we don't see the center of things, so our brain fills it in.
Huh. The center?
And it might be like the side of things. There's some way where our eyeballs do not see part of everything that we're looking at, and our brain logically fills it in, which is the craziest thing. So that just makes you realize. And then there is another theory, which I think is so interesting. I believe his name's Donald Hoffman. So, so through evolution, we've evolved to survive. Our bodies, our experiences, our instincts evolve to keep us alive, to keep our species thriving. And apparently what his theory or hypothesis is that like evolving to see the truth and our reality around us actually hurts our survival. And so instead, our survival and our brains and physiology have evolved to just focus on a tiny percent of the world, because that's what keeps us from getting eaten by a predator. So if we're feeling all these other, possibly going back to mediums, all these like other forms of consciousness that have passed away, or all these other like energies, like that does not help us survive. We need to focus on the tiger, and that's going to eat us, or the warring tribe, or whatever from back in the day. And so that's what we've evolved towards our survival. I'm like, that's so interesting, because I mean, we do only see a percent that's on the electromagnetic spectrum, and we only hear a percent. And we think that we have a concept of what we don't see and hear along those spectrums, but it could be so much more like multi-layered than we even realize. And I mean, it's true, if we were there seeing all these like, for lack of a better word, spirits, I mean, that sounds more believy than I like to talk about things, but if we were to see all that, I mean, a tiger would jump and eat us. And how would we, even in our modern world, it's just so interesting to see how maybe we've evolved. Like, how would we sit and like do our taxes, or build a website for a startup, or design a clothing line for our fashion brand? Just like all the stuff that we now even do to survive is kind of like taken those abilities and evolve them, where we're no longer overall worried about being eaten by a tiger, but the skills for thriving tend to be very like in a material world.
Right, we've centralized everything.
Yeah.
To one like little pinpoint, that totally makes sense. Yeah, they say that there's things within it's going to sound stupid, but like they say that there's things within the naked space, because everything is made up of atoms. So just a matter of how they're vibrating is what we perceive.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that. I think that's so interesting. Yeah, it's so, I mean, all these cool little things. I don't know. I just can't believe that our world is not like so much more complex and complicated than we even could imagine. And like, you think of things that like you know are true because they have to be, but they absolutely don't fit into any of our existence of our world. Like the concept of infinity. Our
Oh,
brains
yeah.
cannot even begin to imagine it, but it obviously has to exist. Like even before, like if you start thinking like, okay, the start of the universe, like the Big Bang, like what about trillions and trillions and trillions of years before that and before that, and then like trillions of years in the future, and like never ending. Like in a sense, like things have to always continue, and things like how did anything ever really start? You know, I mean, there was a time when it's just mind blowing, and
Yeah, we
our
want to put a
3D
start
mind,
on it. Yeah.
yeah, we don't even know how to not, or like traveling eternally in one direction in space. Like, what would we come upon? And I mean, we just literally do not. Like, we are incapable of grasping the concept of infinity, and so that I mean, we already can't grasp the huge percent of existence in that, because the majority of time and space really is infinity when you think about it. I mean, if this, I don't know if it's getting too weird, but
No, that's
so
like
that's just,
that's the actual thing is time and space is infinity.
yeah, yeah. Like most things are infinity, like the nowness and the percent of our life, and even what to us is just insurmountably huge amounts of time, like the Big Bang to now to probably on to the Big Crunch is just such a vast amount of time we can't begin to understand it, but it's like minuscule in the picture of infinity. And it's just, I don't know, it's just when I start thinking about that, our brains cannot understand that. So there probably are states of consciousness that we can't explain or understand. There's nothing else or nothing else worth considering. I just find, I don't know. And I mean, just from what I've seen with what I've been exploring, there's like, well, I do stay scientific and I still consider myself pretty much an atheist. Like, there's definitely things going on that are just, I've literally seen and experienced that do not fit into how I have been raised to understand the world, which is just so, it's just crazy when you start like really getting into all this.
Well, then how do you feel about aliens?
Oh, I'm 100% sure they exist. I mean, not 100%. I'm not 100%
Are
sure of
you
anything, but
one?
just, am I one? No.
I mean, you're very confident about this answer. So
I guess I would think it just seems as in, not, I mean, I hate the word insane. It's just like based on where we were at the time, but like, you know, how many years ago did we think the earth was flat, and then everyone thought the country they were living in, and when they got to the water, that was the end of their existence. Like if you go into the, you know, our whole galaxy and probably other galaxies, to think that there are not other planets that have like the Goldilocks, you know, as they say, like the Goldilocks capabilities where other forms of conscious life exist, is just, maybe humans, maybe species evolved that we don't have here. You know, maybe there's, you know, dinosaurs, who knows, maybe there's a species we've never seen. To think that there's no other planets or solar systems or other galaxies that have conscious life on it, I think would be so highly unlikely.
right, it's kind of where I'm at.
But,
I think it's like ignorant to
yeah.
think that like there's so much unknown. How can't there be something out there?
Yeah. And it's so vast. And I mean, NASA pretty much is almost positive that there's other planets that have life. I mean, do I think little aliens are coming in and abducting people? Probably not, you know?
Damn it.
But
Yeah, well, that's always the second question. Do you believe they've come here before?
maybe. I haven't investigated it enough. I mean, I'd read a book by someone I really admire, Leslie Kean, about this. And then some of the stuff in her book has been written about recently and come out in the New York Times, that these kind of inexplicable UFOs have been seen. I think it's really worth considering. I mean, I think they've added a lot of kind of things that sound like nonsense to the topic. Like, you know, do I think aliens are secretly among us, starting like a little society? No. But yeah, very likely there may be some of those spacecrafts that, again, have been written about in the New York Times, in Leslie Kean's book. Yeah, maybe they've come by. It's totally possible. And, you know, some people have said you have to have a completely much more advanced society to be able to come to another planet, but maybe not. I mean, maybe their bodies have evolved and developed in a way that makes that much easier for them. You know, I mean, fish aren't like these brilliant species because they can be underwater for so long. That's just how their bodies have evolved. So if there's creatures that have evolved that can, you know, their time is so different for them that their lifespan is maybe 1 million years, even if they experience it more like us, then it wouldn't be that for them to spend 10,000 years coming here according to our time, and maybe they need to eat once every 5 years. I mean, and they can move at a faster pace, and that's, not even more advanced. It's just, how they evolved. It would probably not be so hard for them to come by here. But no, I don't think they're like secretly prowling the earth. It'd be pretty cool if they were.
So it's interesting you said that you still feel like you're an atheist, but what do you think, considering that you're able to, you have psychic friends and stuff, so what do you think happens after we pass?
So, I guess what I'll clarify about being an atheist, I've never seen anything in organized religion that seems beyond just like stories written by humans about humans and human code of conduct. Do I think possibly there's higher levels of consciousness that are more advanced than ours? Sure, probably. And so then I think after you die, we just don't know. It seems like you move on into a different state of consciousness. But to have that as something that's defined through organized religion, I've just never seen any evidence of that at all.
So you're thinking those like churches where like that pastor guy like throws his hand at them, they all fall over, is fake?
Yes. I don't even know if fake. I mean, I don't think it's coming from a god. I think maybe people get into like a group mindset and they probably really feel it. And there's probably like a connection between all the people.
Oh, maybe, maybe
but,
feeling all
like
that
mass
energy
consciousness,
you felt.
Yeah. Yeah. They probably do feel really great energy, but you can feel that in totally quote unquote spiritual ways. Like you go to just a really amazing dance party and everyone kind of, connects with this sort of excited energy. They probably all are experiencing that. Do I think it's coming from something defined as a god that's looking down on us with opinions? No.
So you're just not into organized religion is all. You just have your own theories.
I don't even know if I have theories. I'm just sort of taking what I've seen evidence of. And I've seen evidence that points towards that we probably can exist in other forms of consciousness besides the one we're in.
Right.
And then do I think there's one individual consciousness creator that created all of that? I mean, I've absolutely never seen anything that would even indicate that at all.
Which goes to the whole eternity thing, which is holy crap.
Yeah.
We still haven't even discovered like all the different animals and insects and fish life and all on the earth. So how can someone come up with all that fairly quickly? Unless you took a really long time.
Nobody's saying it happened fairly quickly. I mean,
The Bible said 6 days. That's fairly quick.
Yeah.
yeah, but 6 days to whomever wrote the Bible. Maybe that could have been 6 billion years.
What do you guys think? Do you believe in a religion or a god or?
I am all over the place. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
could be persuaded either way. Like right now, maybe I'm an atheist. I don't know. You sound good.
Like, just in case, we do say prayers at night with our son. So just in case.
Nice. Yeah.
Now he's listening to us. He's like, the assholes don't even believe.
But no, I feel like if I were to be pushed one way or another, I would go towards maybe like a Buddhist or a Hindu type, not like a Christianity type thing.
Yeah, like sometimes when we hear like people say like you have like certain like old souls and new souls, and that's like all confusing to me. Especially the one lady we talked to, her parents were new souls, but she was an old soul, which just doesn't make sense. They're saying that like you would need to experience like whatever you want to experience. I guess your soul wants to experience certain things, so it keeps going back into life, I guess, through different people in order to get to like an eternal happiness type deal.
Right. Well, she was discussing the Akashic records,
Just sucks. We're not going to know until we're dead.
and then we might not know either.
Right. We might start. We might
probably
start all over.
Yes. And even if like, consciousness continues and we exist and we go to another dimension, we still probably will only we'll see more than we're seeing here, but we probably don't see everything. We probably just see another portion or percent or different dimension. But my guess would be we don't see anywhere near everything.
Yeah, you hear about these little kids all the time. Like, I was actually just listening to something today. There was a little boy, and I don't know. He's some other country, like that still have tribes and stuff, or like little tribes. And he was, born, and from the time he could talk, he would say to his parents that he was killed in a neighboring town, and by a hatchet or an axe or something like this. And they have a big belief behind, like they support, past lives and all this. So one day, I guess they went to this neighboring town and he confronted his killer and he said, "Hey, you killed me."
So cool.
And the person denied it, but there.
Oh yeah, that
there's a
seems
guy-
reasonable. Why would he say, "Yeah, I remember you.
Yeah.
Killed the shit out of you"?
Could you imagine a
Right.
little tiny human being coming up to somebody and "You killed me"?
I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Yep. I read some of that in like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker stuff, and it's kind of really funny. There was like, this little boy who, I guess this man had killed him. I don't know if intentionally, I don't remember, or if it had been an accident, but this little boy hated that man and would like throw rocks at him whenever he passed. And
Well, that guy
scream at
definitely
him.
killed him then. He's pissed.
Yeah. Yeah, he's so pissed. He's like, "You killed me before. I know you." Or someone was like, and just funny stories. Like there was one little kid, and it was actually one of the most interesting stories. They found out he'd been kind of researching. He'd been this Hollywood agent and, was quite wealthy when he passed. And then as a kid, he was born into like sort of a typical middle class home. And he would just say, "I can't live in these conditions. Where's my,
Oh my God.
housekeeper?" Like, could you imagine you just have your little kid and you're like, normal middle class family. And suddenly you're like 4-year-old kids saying that. And they were so confused.
Listen here, you little shit.
Well, no, I told you about that little boy that I forget the story now, but he would always like draw pictures of like a bomber, like like those airplane bombers and stuff.
Yes.
And eventually, and he would consistently talk about it, and he happened to have the same initials. Maybe I don't really remember
Yep.
the whole story.
James Leininger.
You know this story.
This is heavily researched by Jim Tucker, and he
Okay.
considers it one of the most evidential cases he's ever worked on. It's so fascinating.
Where he eventually even met his sister.
He met his sister. He met his troop from the Air Force.
Right.
Yeah, and shared memories with them. It's such a crazy story.
That gives me the goosebumps. That's such an awesome story, but just so like there's no disproving that. Like he said it since the day he was like able to speak.
Yeah.
And didn't he name
right.
the his little G.I. Joe figures after those particular troop members?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And their hair color matched, like I guess like there was like a blonde guy, a brunette, a redhead in his troop, and he gave each of the dolls the matching name,
Isn't that crazy?
what the person looked like.
That's insane.
That was just like, it was insane. And then when he shared memories with them and with his sister, who was like elderly at this point, and the kid was like 6, they were all able to share memories to the point where they were convinced.
Yeah. That story actually makes me like a little bit sad because he can remember his death. Like that's just terrifying.
Yeah. But imagine, isn't that so much less scary if you think it's not final?
Yeah, but like I'm just saying, like, didn't he say something like little man can't get out, there's a fire or something? Like he would repeat that a lot. That's could you imagine being
like
a parent?
little man on fire, it would be. I guess though, I have such a different perspective in another way. Like, while I would have so much like wanting to comfort my child, I'm feeling so helpless. In another sense, as someone who never ever thought there was an afterlife, like nothing is worse in my mind than just thinking this is it. And when you die, and your loved ones are gone. I had no doubt that's how it was. So all the other stuff, even like a horrible experience like that, like brings me joy still, because it's like, wow. It's still, however traumatic that would be, it's so much better than this is the one life and this is it. And you never get to experience your loved ones again or your life again.
Yeah. No, you're right. It is comforting.
Yeah.
And there's so many stories like that, just like the kids from 9/11 that they could recount stuff like that. And it's amazing.
It's so amazing.
And did you ever have like an affinity for something? Like, I remember when I was little, I used to have like an affinity for like Chinese art. I still do. I wonder if that's like a past life kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I loved like, or just certain foods or certain, like I've always been very visual and into art and colors. And I always loved, like, I felt like I was always really, yeah, just certain things came naturally to me, like visual things and just weird, inexplicable things too. Like I remember, I don't know if you guys had any weird, inexplicable fears as a kid. Like I didn't even remember that I did till I started reading Jim Tucker. And then I remember like, it's such a weird thing to be scared of. But my parents had this heating pad, just a normal heating pad. It was kind of like this faded blue material. And I remember being terrified of it and crying whenever they took it out up until I was about 5, and looking back when I was older and being like, what a weird thing to be scared of. And what freaked me out about it was like this faded blue fabric color, and it kept reminding me of like dying in a hospital, like hospital gowns and hospital colors.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's so weird. I'd never been to a hospital aside from being born. Like, just what a weird association for a 4-year-old, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, considering blue's supposed to be calming.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And it's one of my favorite colors, and it normally is. But somehow, just the way the heating pad looked, I just kept associating it with like end of life in a hospital and like hospital gowns.
Isn't that funny for a little tiny girl to think like that? Well, I remember walking down the street. I couldn't have been more than 4, and looking at my hands and saying, these hands are so young. My hands are so young. And then I would get this image in my head of like, those like, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but there's like one picture in the middle and a whole bunch of pictures on the outside of it in a circle, like an oval. And like you're supposed to put your first grade picture, second grade, third grade, and then the middle might be your graduation picture. So something like that was floating around in my head. Like, why am I here? Like, why are my hands so young? Must have died elderly.
That's so cool. Yeah. Yeah. And I've had a few friends who, since I've talked about this with, where they'll be like, they remember being young and being like, oh, when I was big, and then being so confused. I mean, I remember one specifically saying that he and his sister were talking about, oh, well, when I was big. And then he was telling me he was so confused because he was like, wait, but I'm bigger now than I've ever been in this life. Like, you're supposed to get bigger. You don't get smaller. And he was just so confused, but he just kept remembering when he was big and couldn't figure that out. And I was like, that's so interesting. And that seems to be a line that these little kids say a lot, is when I was big.
It's just
so weird.
I guess we do lose like the veil is like finally pushed down after a certain age. It's just got to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember if there were other things from that age. I mean, there was one kind of weird thing that I just never really consolidated in my mind because I couldn't make sense of it, but like feeling like there was someone else with me in my room, and like, but in a really loving way, like it was a good presence. And I always remembered it, but like it never stayed in like top of my mind memory because it was always sort of frustrated me because I could never make sense of it, especially the way I was raised. I remember kind of trying to talk to my mom about it, and I could just tell she didn't really, like, it was just something that she couldn't even begin to like perceive in that way. And I just sort of understood, which is a really big thing to understand when you're 4. Like I understood however she was perceiving it was not like what it was. I didn't really have the vocabulary for this, and I kind of had to, like, I guess I just let go of it. And I mean, I forgot, and this, I think I was around 2, 3, 4 when this happened. I was definitely under 5 years old, and I don't remember how frequently, but it was definitely like for a while.
Yeah, like it's just so frustrating being so young and yet not, but you realize, because did you ever, like, when you're young, you think, your parents are talking down to you kind of like, but they shouldn't be, like, more than they know that they think
Yeah, it's so true.
That's why I always did the opposite with my daughter, because I always just assumed she's got to know as much as I did when I was little.
Yeah. And how is that paid off? Is she like exceptionally mature for her age, or?
I think she's reverted backwards. No, no, she used to be. She used to be very, she was very astute, but she always had like night terrors and stuff like that. So like she's had a complicated history. I just always let her have the word, because you never know what they're thinking. You don't want them to get frustrated, like, you might have when you were younger,
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I have a weirdly, like, really good memory. So I remember being like 2, 3, and 4 really well. And kids that age are smart. I mean, they have a wisdom. They might not be able to sit and discuss philosophy and, science and read books yet, but there's such a wisdom. Like, I mean, I remember at that age sort of like, yeah, like this processing of the world and like complex concept, I mean, I remember like sort of processing the concept of time. I mean, just existence. It's like, it's a much, I think, smarter, deeper age than people really understand, just because kids aren't like good at being humans yet. They're kind of dismissed in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that brings me back. Yeah, totally frustrating in a way. But then in a way, you have to learn life, I guess. I don't know.
Right. But yeah, I think kids like should be allowed to make a lot more choices than they're allowed to make. Like, I think about one day when I want to have kids, like I think my parents did great in many ways, but there were certain areas where I think it was blown off because I was a kid that probably should have been taken much more seriously. Like, I think kids really know what's good for them or bad for them. I mean, you're not going to let them have like ice cream for dinner and no vegetables. I mean, kids would like that very much. But like a certain, I don't know, like, I mean, I really knew when certain people were bad for me, or like my school, like starting kindergarten was like a terrible place. And they just thought, it wasn't like taken seriously, but I think kids can really feel sort of like, for lack of a better word, like bad energies, and when like things aren't right and when people aren't good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think everybody has that kind of energy feel. Well, I think that way, but who knows? There's a lot of people that might not.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of unlearn, at least my experience, I felt like I had to unlearn that. And now I'm trying to relearn it again.
Yeah, like my husband doesn't understand. Like if I meet somebody and I just get a bad feel for them, it's typically, I feel like it's typically the right, you should always go at your gut is really what it is.
Yeah. And I'm relearning that because I remember being a little kid and I'd meet someone and just not like them. And some people I would just absolutely love, and some people I just wasn't that interested in. And I think that kind of, it's like a guide of who your like group is, like who you're supposed to be with. And then I think as I got older, you're kind of taught to bring so much rationality to that. Like, oh, why don't I like that person? They seem really nice. Or, I don't feel at home with this person, but we have so much in common. We do the same work and we're the same age and our like boyfriends are friends or whatever. Like, I should really like them, but you don't. I feel as a little kid, it's like, it's so instinctive, but you're kind of taught to turn it off to get along with everybody. And, we're really, I think it's one of the best skills, and really unfortunate we're taught to turn it off, because it's kind of looked at as mean in a certain way, I guess, when it isn't. It's just like, you can meet someone who's just a lovely person. It doesn't mean you don't like them, but they're just not your person. Like, you just don't relate. And I think we're sort of taught to turn that off.
Yeah, because everybody wants you to get along. Can't we all just get along?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just certain people you jive with because they're on the same wavelength, or they have the same energy or the same vibration.
Yeah.
And the other people will just go fuck off.
And then there's really like typically people that really mean to do you harm, and you just know that. Like, you just know they're not a good energy. So you want to steer clear of those people.
Right.
It's the
Very
force.
true.
There you go, your science fiction.
Yes. Oh, yes. It's all really interesting. And you wonder, is it like, like the mediums I know would say it's like they're your soul group. Like, you get some like your, the most extreme would be like, it's your spirit guides telling you these are your soul groups. Or, maybe it's just micro expressions and understanding and reading like who you get along with. I mean, we really don't know. But it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've known my husband for longer than I've actually known him. Obviously, when we met, I felt like a kinship to him. Somehow we were connected somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've felt that instantly. And I feel like some of the people I've dated longer than others, I've felt that with sort of something a little different instantly. And I mean, I hope to meet like my husband, and I feel like, I'm very curious to see if it's sort of this instant knowledge when we meet, or is it going to be like we're friends first and then surprise? I mean, you just don't know. But I've heard from a lot of people that something felt different the second they met.
Oh, yeah, like I totally hated her for like the longest time.
Totally hated him. We didn't even, actually, we worked together for so long and we didn't even know each other existed. And then one day,
really?
It was weird, right?
I guess. But then we fell in love, and now we're going back towards like that hatred.
Yeah, hatred. No, we have a really good relationship. Right, Steve?
Yes, dear. I'm her project.
Oh no.
Well, Liz, I think we pretty much touched on everything, but why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Great, and thank you so much. This was such an interesting conversation. If anyone would like to know more, you can go to my website, where you can also link to all my social media. And that's WTFjusthappened.net. And yeah, you can sign up to get updates on when my book's going to launch, follow my blog, follow all my social media accounts. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This was truly a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you had fun.
Also.
And as always, you guys can find us at thebeerlatteshow.com, and all our stuff is on there too. All our Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And, you know, we sometimes, I was going to say usually, but it's a lie, ask a question for the week. But Liz, you wanna know anything for the two people listening to get your feedback on?
Yeah, I guess I would be really curious to see if anyone else has had experiences that, from a logical perspective, make them think there could be an afterlife or something else out there. Any like weird, inexplicable signs from loved ones or strange things that have happened.
That's deep.
I want to know that too.
We'll see everybody next week.
Yeah. This drip all on my body, soaking wet the sunny. Looking like a walking lick, yeah,